All right. Do y'all have anything you want to talk about? Like any new tools you found, or any interesting news in the tech world? Do you want to mention?
I'm using another new Postman is Postman. It's a client for testing, I guess, APIs and stuff like that. There's a new one that's out that I've been trying out. It's actually pretty nice. It's called Insomnia. Yeah. Okay. So it's a free one. Yeah. It's a free one. And it's cool the way it lets you kind of section off things into kind of little projects of requests and things like that. Now, the thing that I like in Postman that Insomnia doesn't have is the fact that you can actually, I needed it for this one past project. And I think Lewis was the one who told me. I did a request, and then the only way that I could do a request on this one server was through curl. I don't know if you guys like curl. I don't. But it was able to convert it to like a curl request command. I was like, oh, okay, copy paste now. This is cool. But yeah, anyways, tooling for like testing APIs and applications. And so, check out Insomnia, see if y'all guys like it. But I'm liking it. So, it's a little bit better graphic interface and looks a lot, a lot nicer and a lot slicker.
Do you have any trouble with any authentication stuff?
No, I'm actually authenticating to a payment API, which those are pretty locked down, and I was able to kind of get to their API with Insomnia, which is kind of cool. Because usually they're like pretty locked down. But it's pretty straightforward to create a user for Insomnia. And it's free download, so
yeah. GraphQL. I know you gave a talk at the WebDev about GraphQL.
You said GraphQL. Sorry.
Yeah, it was really good.
At the WebDev meetup.
So I don't know if is that posted online somewhere?
Yeah, it's probably on it's on Grok's Facebook, I think. I gave a talk on GraphQL and using GraphQL with Ruby specifically and Rails at the WebDev meetup. I can give the same talk here, and I could kind of dive more into the Ruby part of it. But GraphQL is awesome. Shopify started using it because of exactly the reason they have so much complexity. GraphQL allows you to take all these RESTful endpoints and this API that you kind of ad hoc have to decide all these standards for, and you start to use the GraphQL specification. And by using the GraphQL specification, you gain a lot of convention. So in the Rails sense, you gain a lot of convention over configuration. GraphQL clients can connect to your API, and they can make requests, and they can send queries that have to meet a certain spec so that you know that queries are valid. It's really interesting. It's very new technology, but GitHub's already jumping on board. Shopify's jumped on board. Facebook has been using it and developing it since 2012. They use it every day, and it's incredible. It's awesome. It makes APIs so much nicer, but at the same time, you have to kind of rethink how you think about APIs. It turns into more like more like SQL, in that you send a query into the black box, and then within the black box, all of this stuff happens. Like you define parts of it, but eventually the query gets resolved, and you get JSON back, and it's amazing. It's awesome, and I do want to give the talk at one of these meetups. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So,
what's it called again?
GraphQL.
Is it fake?
Yeah, definitely. Next time we just schedule it.
Yeah, okay. That's
GHQL.
GRAPH. Yeah, QL.
GraphQL.org.
Cool.
It's the only way I want to make APIs in the future.
That's kind of how I feel too after hearing your talk. Yeah, I'm like, Rust doesn't look so good anymore.
So it's just like a GUI interface to your.
It's hard to so. GraphQL defines a specification, and the specification is a query language, so a kind of query that you can send into a GraphQL endpoint, and then that query gets resolved, and then the results get sent back. Now the cool thing is that the queries are dynamic. So let's say you have an iOS application. That iOS application could have a query that defines all the data it needs for the first page, and then it sends that query into the GraphQL API, and that query gets resolved and gets sent back all the data you need in one query. That's the important thing, in one request response cycle. Interface. So you have a web app that needs different data. It can be hitting the exact same GraphQL API, the same endpoint, and sending a whole different query in. And as long as the query meets the specification, and as long as the types can get resolved, you get data back. And so this kind of solves the problem of how do you deal with associated data within a deeply nested query. So let's say you're getting posts and you need like comments, and then you need the users of those comments, but then some interfaces don't need the users, so you don't want to give them all that extra data, and some interfaces don't need the comments at all. And there's all these little edge cases that you end up having to worry about when you build your APIs that get solved by being able to pass in queries that get resolved, that get figured out dynamically, and you get data back that matches the query. So it's a much better way of talking to APIs. It saves bandwidth, it saves requests and responses, it saves a lot of time and effort. And once you define your types, because you're defining your schemas as types, right? Like a type system in a language. You're defining it as this is a user type, this is a comment type, these are the fields available on those types. You can start to infer what is available, and you can start to introspect what you can query within APIs. So then you no longer have to kind of refer to the documentation for everything. You can just actually ask the endpoint, what types do you support at the root level? Then of those types, what types do they have as associations? What fields do they have? What types are the fields? Are they integers or strings or some kind of special scalar that's like a date? So many things.
Yeah.
It's really awesome. It's really incredible.
So, how I use Facebook's API a little bit. It's like the Graph API, right? So it's
Very much like that. Yeah.
And you know how they have like SQL or whatever, like
Yeah.
their own like query language.
They used to do that, yeah. And it's the same idea, but the GraphQL query specification looks more like JSON. SQL used to try to be like SQL.
Okay.
And it's not the exact
So
same,
it's different in that way.
but it's the same in the sense that you're giving them a query that you need resolved, and you're going to get the data back you need, and no more and no less.
Yeah.
And that is the most optimum thing to do, because different interfaces need different data, and you should be able to get all that data in a single request.
Nothing extra.
Yep.
Sweet.
So I'll give a talk later.
Yeah.
I think it'll be fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's exciting stuff.